Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we are diving into a case that has recently surged back into the headlines. And honestly, it is one of the most frustrating, controversial examples of tunnel vision in modern history. It is a story about what happens when public panic puts so much pressure on the police that they stop looking for the actual truth and instead start looking for a scapegoat. It involves a brutal crime in broad daylight, a traumatized little boy, and an undercover honey trap operation that completely crossed the line. To understand how a whole nation lost its mind, we have to go back to July 15, 1992. London was in the middle of a beautiful, sweltering summer heat wave. On Wimbledon Common, a massive, peaceful park filled with open grass and quiet woodland trails, people were out enjoying the morning sun. Among them was Rachel Nickell. Rachel was a bright, happy young mother, deeply artistic and completely devoted to her family. That morning, she was doing what she did almost every day, walking her dog, a beautiful black retriever, across the common. But she wasn't alone. Walking right beside her, holding her hand, was her 2-year-old son, Alex. It was an entirely ordinary, peaceful family morning. The park was vast, the sun was out, and there was absolutely no reason to think that any danger was lurking in the trees. But out of nowhere, the peace of the common was shattered in an instant. A man stepped out of the secluded brush. He didn't say a word. He didn't demand money. He simply grabbed Rachel. What followed was an act of sudden, unspeakable brutality. In broad daylight, right in front of her toddler, Rachel was violently attacked and killed. The entire encounter took less than 2 minutes. The killer then vanished back into the thick woodland, blending into the summer heat as if he were a ghost. A short while later, another passerby stumbled upon the scene and saw something that would haunt them for the rest of their days. Rachel was lying still on the grass, and sitting right beside her body, covered in her mother's blood, was little 2-year-old Alex. He was gently patting her face, repeating the same 4 heartbreaking words over and over again. "Wake up, Mommy." When the news broke, a wave of pure terror swept through the United Kingdom. Parents locked their doors. Women refused to walk through parks alone. The British media went into an absolute frenzy, demanding immediate answers. The Metropolitan Police were under a level of pressure they had never experienced before. Every single day that the killer remained free, the headlines grew louder, calling the police incompetent. Detectives knew they didn't just need to find the killer, they needed to find him fast to stop the public bleeding. And that extreme, desperate pressure is exactly what caused the police to do something unthinkable. They locked their sights onto a local, eccentric man who lived nearby. They decided he was guilty before they even had a single shred of physical evidence, and to prove it, they were about to launch one of the most manipulative, dangerous undercover operations in criminal history. With absolutely zero forensic clues left behind at the crime scene, the Metropolitan Police did something that, in hindsight, would completely derail the course of justice. They brought in a criminal psychologist to build an offender profile. The psychologist told them to look for a specific kind of man, a loner, sexually frustrated, someone who lived close to the park and spent his days wandering the paths. Shortly after, a tip came in through a television crime appeal. A few callers pointed toward a 29-year-old unemployed man living in a nearby estate. His name was Colin Stagg. Now, if you looked at Colin on paper back in 1992, he was definitely an eccentric guy. He lived alone, he spent hours walking his dog on Wimbledon Common, and he practiced an ancient pagan religion called Wicca. To a conservative British public and a desperate police force, Colin didn't just fit the profile, he looked like the perfect suspect. The police picked him up, dragged him into the interrogation room, and questioned him intensely. But Colin flat out denied having anything to do with Rachel's death. He told them he was just a normal guy who liked the outdoors. And when detectives checked their tables, they realized a devastating truth. They had no DNA, no fingerprints, and no witnesses linking Colin to the weapon or the crime scene. By law, they had to let him walk out the door. But the lead detective, Keith Petter, refused to back down. He became entirely convinced that Colin was a master manipulator playing dumb. The police decided that if they couldn't find physical evidence, they would have to extract a confession. This is where the case transitions from a standard investigation into something deeply dark and manipulative. The Met Police launched a covert operation codenamed Operation Edzil. Today, historians call it one of the most catastrophic honey traps in British legal history. The Met Police selected a beautiful undercover female officer and gave her the fake identity of Lizzie James. The plan was incredibly twisted. The police discovered that Colin had previously answered a Lonely Hearts column in a magazine looking for romance. So Lizzie contacted Colin, pretending to be a friend of a woman he used to write to. She told him she was lonely, she liked his letters, and she wanted to get to know him better. To a young, isolated guy like Colin, this felt like a miracle. He thought a beautiful woman had genuinely fallen in love with him from afar. He had absolutely no idea that every single letter he received was being carefully written by a team of detectives and a psychologist sitting around a table designing a trap to break his mind. Over the course of 5 grueling months, Lizzie James systematically pulled Colin into a psychological web. They spoke on the phone for hours. They met up for romantic walks. But the police didn't just want to talk about normal relationship things. Under the direction of the case psychologist, Lizzie started introducing highly dark, violent sexual fantasies into their letters. She told Colin that she was a submissive woman who could only be attracted to a dominant, deeply dangerous man. She was essentially dangling the promise of intimacy and love in front of him, but with a massive, horrific condition. In one of the most famous, chilling exchanges of the operation, Lizzie pushed him directly on the subject of the park. She wrote to him saying she had dark fantasies about violence and whispered over the phone, "If only you had done the Wimbledon Common murder. If only you had killed her, it would be all right." The police were sitting in their van, recording the line, waiting for Colin to take the bait and brag about what he did to Rachel Nickell. They thought they were seconds away from solving the biggest case in the country. But Colin's response completely shocked them. He didn't brag. He didn't play the big bad criminal. He sounded confused and genuinely remorseful that he couldn't give her what she wanted. Colin spoke directly into the phone and said, "I'm terribly sorry, but I haven't." Think about the psychological weight of that for a second. For 5 months, this undercover officer threw every dark temptation at this man, begging him to admit to a murder, and every single time, Colin insisted he was innocent. He told her he had dark thoughts sometimes, like anyone else, but he could never hurt a soul. But the lead detectives were so blinded by their own narrative that they couldn't see the truth right in front of them. They convinced themselves that Colin was just playing a brilliant psychological game with Lizzie. In August 1993, despite having absolutely no physical evidence, and despite Colin explicitly denying the crime on tape, the Metropolitan Police made a drastic decision. They moved in, put handcuffs on Colin Stagg, and officially charged him with the murder of Rachel Nickell.
They thought they had won. They had no idea they had just walked straight into a historic courtroom disaster.
For 13 grueling months, Colin Stagg sat inside a cold remand prison cell. Outside those prison walls, his face was plastered across every single tabloid newspaper in the United Kingdom. To the British public, he wasn't a suspect awaiting trial. He was already a convicted monster. His home was vandalized, his family was harassed, and he was universally hated. The media praised the Metropolitan Police for their brilliant, sophisticated undercover work. They truly believed they had taken a brilliant psychopath off the streets. But in September 1994, the case finally reached the Old Bailey, the highest criminal court in London. Colin's defense barrister, a sharp and brilliant legal mind named William Clegg, sat at the defense table. He had spent months poring over thousands of pages of transcribed phone calls and the 40 highly explicit letters exchanged between Colin and Lizzie James. Clegg knew there was no DNA. He knew there were no fingerprints. He realized the prosecution's entire case rested on a psychological trap. When the trial opened, Clegg didn't wait. He stood up and launched a massive, aggressive pre-trial challenge, demanding that the judge look closely at exactly how the police obtained their supposed evidence. The trial judge was Mr. Justice Agnall, a legendary no-nonsense figure in the British legal system. For days, the court sat in dead silence as the secret audio tapes and transcripts of Operation Edsel were played out loud. The court listened to the undercover policewoman practically begging Colin to admit to the murder, promising him intimacy, affection, and a relationship if he would just say he did it. They listened to a desperate, lonely man repeatedly saying he was innocent, only to be pushed deeper into dark, violent, psychological corners by a team of handlers sitting in a van outside. As the details unfolded, Mr. Justice Agnall's face grew increasingly rigid. He wasn't just unimpressed, he was completely disgusted. The judge didn't even let the case proceed to a full jury trial. He cut the proceedings short and delivered a blistering, historic ruling that sent shockwaves straight through Scotland Yard. Justice Agnall looked out at the courtroom and completely condemned the police operation. He stated that the detectives had shown an excessive zeal and had tried to incriminate an innocent man by using deceptive conduct of the grossest kind. He ruled that the entire honey trap operation was completely inadmissible. It was wholly reprehensible, abusive, and an insult to justice. With the honey trap evidence thrown in the trash, the prosecution's case instantly evaporated. They had absolutely nothing else to present. The prosecution formally withdrew the charges, and the judge ordered that Colin Stagg be immediately acquitted and set free. After more than a year behind bars, Colin walked out the front doors of the Old Bailey as a legally free man. But out on the streets of London, true justice didn't exist for him. The lead detective on the case, Keith Petter, refused to apologize. He even went on television over the following years, continuing to push the narrative that Colin was guilty and simply beaten the system on a legal technicality. Because the police had spent 2 years telling the public that Colin was the killer, the public believed them. People threw trash at him in the street. Shops refused to serve him. Colin had escaped a prison cell only to walk directly into a lifetime of public exile. And while the police were busy congratulating themselves on their theory, and while Colin was fighting for his life, the real monster who actually stepped out of the bushes on July 15, 1992, was still walking the streets, free, completely unhunted, and waiting to strike again. When Colin Stagg walked free in 1994,
The public assumed a guilty man had slipped through the cracks, but the truth was infinitely worse. By focusing all their energy, time, and money on a honey trap, the police had allowed a violent serial offender to stay completely hidden in plain sight. His name was Robert Napper, and if the police had spent less time analyzing Colin Stagg's letters and more time looking at active criminal files, they would have caught him. Napper was a deeply disturbed individual who had already been committing a string of terrifying assaults across London. In fact, multiple tipsters had called the police lines saying Napper looked exactly like the facial composites of Rachel's attacker. But because detectives were completely blinded by their tunnel vision, those tips were ignored. The cost of that mistake was devastating. More than a year after Rachel Nickell was killed, while the police were still actively running their undercover operation against Colin, Napper struck again. He broke into the home of a 27-year-old mother named Samantha Bissett, brutally taking her life and the life of her 4-year-old daughter, Jasmine. 2 more completely innocent lives were erased simply because the real killer had been left free to roam. Napper was finally caught for the Bissett murders in 1994 and locked away in a high-security psychiatric hospital. But it took a cold case review a decade later for advanced DNA technology to finally bridge the gap. In 2004, forensic teams re-examined the microscopic physical evidence taken from Rachel Nickell's clothing on that summer morning in 1992. Using refined profiling techniques that didn't exist during the original investigation, they found a match. It wasn't Colin Stagg, it was Robert Napper. In 2008, Napper stood in a courtroom and finally pleaded guilty to the manslaughter of Rachel Nickell. With the truth exposed, the Metropolitan Police faced a massive, humiliating public reckoning. They had to issue an official, unprecedented apology to Colin Stagg for entirely destroying his reputation and his life. The government awarded Colin over £700,000 in compensation. It was one of the largest payouts for police misconduct in British history. But to Colin, no amount of money could buy back the decade he spent being hated by an entire nation. Decades later, this case has completely surged back into the public consciousness, dominating global charts thanks to the recent Netflix true crime productions detailing the disaster of Operation Edsel. It stands as a permanent, chilling warning to the justice system. It shows what happens when investigators decide on a story first and try to force reality to fit it later. Rachel's son, Alex, who was just 2 years old when he was found clinging to his mother on that grass, grew up and eventually wrote a book about his journey through the trauma. He ultimately chose a path of healing and forgiveness, a beautiful, miraculous contrast to the absolute ugliness of the crime. But it leaves us with a heavy, deeply unsettling question. How do we stop the justice system from letting public pressure turn them into predators? If the police can build a psychological trap to convict an innocent person just to secure a quick win, who is actually safe? And what do you think about the undercover officer, Lizzie James, who had her own mental health permanently scarred by the very operation the police forced her to run? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about it. Thank you for watching all the way through. Hit that subscribe button for more deep psychological breakdowns. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next case.